These days, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries, sending away good jobs and our capability to make things. American Giant is pushing back against that tide. They make the high-quality clothing staples you need for a comfortable, stylish, and active summer wardrobe, like vintage-style tees, breathable polos, lightweight sweatshirts, and so much more, right here in the USA. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs in towns and cities across the country, and jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. Support America's workers and get 20% off your first order at american-giant.com with promo code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at american-giant.com, code STAPLE20.
Cloud, good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Jay.
All right, Jim, so the Twins are now up against it after losing last night 8-6 in 13 innings to the Marlins. They have 3 games left. They're 3 games back. They need to win all 3 and then have either the Royals or Tigers lose all 3 to make the playoffs. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, not going to happen. Last night was just another gut punch, horrible loss. They get down early. They fight back. Jeffers drops a throw on a force-out at home plate. Inexplicable, completely inexplicable. Just lets a run score. Also pops into a double play when he's trying to bunt. The guy might have cost him, and didn't. The guy might have cost him 2 or 3 runs all by himself. He's had a terrible second half. Right when he was, as of May or June, he looked like he was going to be one of the best players in the game, and he has completely collapsed. And that really cedes a big advantage. One of the advantages the Twins had was they were getting more hitting out of their catching position than most teams do with Jeffers on fire, and he's been a disaster second half of the season. Not the only one, but he was terrible last night. He's been terrible for a long time. They did not hit with runners in scoring position. Wasted a good night from Correa. It's just a bad team right now. It's been a bad team for too long.
Are they a bad team because they're playing bad now, or is this a team that could be better if they just got into a hotter streak, which I know is not going to help them this year, but, does this necessitate a bunch of changes to be made?
I don't think so. I just think that the injuries caused them to rely on a lot of young players who could give them a good spurt but couldn't sustain. But it's not that. It's also not that. Just that. I think that's the primary underlying cause. Also would have helped if they had brought in a veteran starting pitcher, and I think that's the one magic bullet that if they'd gone out and spent money on a starting pitcher could have given them a lot of innings, then they could have put Varland in the bullpen, and they would have been better in the rotation and better in the bullpen and deeper in the bullpen, and that might have saved their season. But it doesn't help the fact that they can't hit with runners in scoring position. I mean, nothing cures that. No free agent pitching signing or trade deadline move helps with that. They've kind of fallen apart as a clutch hitting team. And that's one of those things that, you can pretend you know what the answer to that is, but you really don't. I mean, some teams hit in the clutch, some others don't. There's no real science to it. It's more of a mentality. And I just think you have a lot of young players putting pressure on themselves. If Jefferson in a horrible slump, you had Correa out for a long time, Buxton out for a long time. Lewis has gone from being one of the best players in the game to being a guy you don't really want to see up with runners in scoring position. It's just kind of it's a collapse, and it's a collapse with a lot of different parents.
Jim, what do you feel like the lineup is going to look like next year? Is it going to be similar to what they had this year?
I mean, probably. I mean, Correa and Buxton are on long-term deals, and they're great players when they're healthy. And Buxton actually he's played in 101 games. That's actually a really good thing. Everybody would have taken it at the beginning of the year. And his OPS is pretty good. He hasn't gotten big hits lately. Well, he actually did. He had a big home run the other night. It just didn't matter. So that's a good thing. Correa, they got to figure out his feet. But he's a wonderful player. Royce Lewis, I think, will learn from this and be better next year for it. A lot of the young players, I think, will have a better idea how to grind through a long season. So I don't think they lack talent. I think they lack they probably one arm short. Well, I can't even say that. So many of the guys who weren't ready to help them win this year very well might be ready to help them win next year, whether it's Royce Lewis or Festa or Zepper or, or Simeon Lewis Richardson, who was great for months but kind of tuckered out at the end. They had bad luck with Topa. He could have made a huge difference, and he pitched in 2 games this year. So it's really not a bad roster. They've just choked here for the last month and a half.
Jim, do you think anybody is going to, they still are going to finish above 500. Is there going to be any major changes? And I guess the other thing I wanted to know about too is that if they get a better TV deal, will that open up some money to go and pursue maybe a free agent starting pitcher?
You would like to think so. The free agent starting pitching thing is interesting because obviously there was a need for that this year. Next year, if you have Lopez, Ryan, Ober, Paddock, Simeon Woods Richardson, Festa, Zepper, do you go out and sign a veteran free agent pitcher? Or do you maybe get one more great bullpen arm, knowing that no matter how deep your bullpen looks at the beginning of the year, you're going to need an extra arm at some point. You could put Varland in the bullpen, maybe sign one, do what Cleveland did and just build a lights out bullpen that's going to win you every close game. The other thing they could use, here's the other thing they could use. And Roy Smalley has talked about this for years on the podcast. That's our Chin Music podcast with myself, Lavelle, and Roy. So good teams have that one sure thing hitter in the middle of the lineup. Not sure thing that you're going to you're going to drive in runs every day, but sure thing you're going to get good quality at bats every day. They had that with Nelson Cruz, and he made a massive difference. Buxton, Correa, and Royce Lewis. Correa's probably a 2 or a 5 hitter. Buxton's maybe a 1 or a 3 hitter. You need a cleanup hitter or a 3 hitter who's just going to give you great at bats every day, and he's going to be a reliable run producer. I love Carlos Santana. I love what he's done for the team this year. But maybe you instead of spending money on a starting pitcher, maybe you spend that money on a Nelson Cruz type to kind of just anchor the lineup.
Jim, looking ahead to some of the other things going on, we got college football tomorrow. Gophers at Michigan. Max Brosmer, he struggled especially in the second half against Iowa. What adjustments do you see the Gophers making, and can they move the ball against Michigan?
This feels like a game that's going to be won on the line of scrimmage, and I'm not sure they can handle Michigan on either side of the ball. If they don't stop Michigan's running game, just like we saw with Iowa, then it's game over. Brosmer, right when you thought, man, this guy's catching fire, he had a terrible second half. I don't know. This would be a massive upset if the Gophers win this one. I think it would be an upset if they stay in the game for 60 minutes.
Vikings are going to play the Packers on Sunday. We still don't know if it's Jordan Love or if they're going to go with the quarterback that's been running for in the last couple of weeks. And what do you think is going to end up happening here?
I have no idea who's going to play. Love has been listed as limited the last 2 days. I have a sneaking suspicion because LaFleur loves beating the Vikings, and he sees a chance to pull even in the division with a tiebreaker. I have a sneaking suspicion he's going to play Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love was fairly close to playing last week, and I think he wanted him to be ready for this week. So that's my guess today. Probably wrong, but if you want me to make a guess, that's my guess.
Sure.
For the Vikings, they do have some injuries. It does look like Addison's going to be back, but they do have some nagging injuries. Pace hasn't practiced this week. Jay Ward hasn't practiced this week. Jonathan Bullard hasn't practiced this week. Darisaw missed practice yesterday. I think Darisaw will be back. I think it's more of an illness than an injury. Pace is a good player, but they have so many players like him that, they can play Metellus at linebacker. And Bullard's a good player, but he's not one of their best players. So I think the Vikings are in fairly decent shape. Dallas Turner practiced in full yesterday. So I think they're going to look like a pretty healthy team on Sunday.
The Viking defense has been outstanding so far this year. what challenges are they going to face if they go up against Jordan Love? Do they have to protect against the pass more? Does Flores adjust things at all? I mean, he's been aggressive, and yet they haven't been giving up a lot of big plays either.
Well, right. I mean, the key thing you hear from Vikings defenders is they are asked to do simple things on their side that look very complex from the quarterback's perspective. I think that's the genius of Flores' defense. And that was, when I covered Tony Dungy, that's what he always said. His assignments for his players were very simple, but the way they looked to the opposing quarterback and the opposing offensive coordinator, it looked like 3D chess. So the real question is they've already beaten two really good quarterbacks and another quarterback who's making $160 million. So the question is Jordan Love better prepared, and is Matt LaFleur better prepared to find weaknesses in this defense that they can exploit? And that's the mystery of the game. I have no idea how that's going to play out.
Jim, last night the Dallas Cowboys ended up winning 20-15 against the New York Giants. Dak Prescott had a couple of touchdown passes in that one. Is this just a case where Dallas is pretty average? I mean, they're 2-2. They struggled to blow the Giants out, and the Vikings did play the Giants, and they did blow them out on the road.
Honestly, if it weren't for CeeDee Lamb, if they didn't have CeeDee Lamb on their roster, they would have lost that game. And listen, you actually say that about a lot of teams. Of course, your best player needs to be your best player. But, Prescott was okay. Their running game was mediocre. Their secondary receivers were okay. Their defense was okay. I actually thought that Daniel Jones kind of looked like Daniel Jones. He's pretty good at operating underneath. He's pretty good at kind of being a game manager. He also threw about 6 deep balls that were underthrown and just terrible throws. Otherwise, the Giants very well could have won that game. And by the way, Malik Neighbors is the real deal. He is a great receiver. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Jones can get the ball to him deep, because he certainly has done wonders working underneath and doing all the other things he did. So, yeah, I think the Giants are an average team. I think the Cowboys are slightly better than average, and no better than that.
Well, and we did see that, Malik Neighbors left the game early with a concussion, too, so that hopefully that's not going to be a big deal for him. Yeah,
I hope not, because he's a wonderful player to watch.
Minnesota Lynx are going to open up the playoffs of the second round, the semifinals, against Connecticut on Sunday at home at 7:30. Your thoughts on this matchup? Now we've had a little day to kind of digest it.
What's really interesting, I wrote about the Lynx today. I looked through their playoff history, their long, glorious playoff history. This is the first Minnesota Lynx team to ever score 100 points in consecutive playoff games. And this team has had 2 playoff games. They've done it both times. It's amazing how efficient they've been on offense. Now they run up against a great defensive team, a very physical defensive team. Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bonner. This is going to be a really interesting matchup. So I think this is going to be very physical, fierce, highly competitive basketball. Can the Lynx continue to operate at a very efficient, high production rate against this defense? That's going to be really interesting to watch.
All right, Jim, what do you got in your podcasts?
Let's see, we just put out Prep Today with John Millay, his trips around the state. We have the Chin Music Show with Lavelle and myself breaking down the Twins' problems. We have Jeff Diamond's, the former Viking general manager, Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider on the Packers and Vikings matchup. We have John Krasinski on the Wolves, Randy Shaver on high school football, Mike Grimm on the Gophers, Don Mitchell on all things sports, especially women's sports. Kevin Gorg on hockey, Michael Russo and Anthony Lepanto on hockey, and everything's at talknorth.com. All
right, Jim, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday.
Thanks, Jay.
It's Jim Souhan, Star Tribune sports columnist, joining us every weekday morning at this time here on WJON. Follow him on Twitter at SouhanStrib. Check out his latest column at the Star Tribune or his podcast at talknorth.com. And Jim, once again today, is brought to you by the Green Mill in downtown St. Cloud. Next on WJON, world and national news from ABC, followed by local news.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.